Thank you, Joshua. You will stay with us as we move on to our next news. US President Donald Trump has reportedly acknowledged that Russia has been able to cope with the sanctions imposed on it and called his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin a professional. Trump reflected on his July 3rd phone conversation with Putin and stated that Putin has been able to manage sanctions. However, he also warned that more restrictions could be on the way in response to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Moreover, the US President Donald Trump added that he believes the Russian leader is not thrilled about the prospect of further sanctions. Late, he also remarked that he is tougher on Russia than he is on Iran. Here's what the US President has said.
We talk about sanctions a lot, yeah.
What does he say?
I would say he's not thrilled with it, but, he's been able to handle sanctions, but these are pretty biting sanctions. No, we talk about sanctions a lot, and he understands that it may be coming, and, he's a professional.
Now we know that they have talked on 3rd, US President Donald Trump, and has reportedly acknowledged that Russia has been able to cope with the sanctions imposed on it and called his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, a professional. Trump reflected on his July 3rd phone conversation with Putin and stated that Putin has been able to manage sanctions. However, he also warned that more restrictions could be on the way. Now we're joined with Joshua Barnes. He's an anchor and correspondent at NewsX World. Joshua, what more can you tell us about the Trump and Putin situation?
Well, yes, conversations between Trump and Putin have been more common in recent times. Of course, a previous conversation in June. Trump's been very vocal since the start of his second term, even during his campaign and after winning the election, saying that his goal was to get this war ended within days. He has pushed for ceasefires backed by Ukraine, but ignored by Russia and not followed through with. There has been pressure from Western allies, European nations, including the UK, France, the EU bloc themselves, and other key stakeholders in the Coalition of the Willing, which are a group of countries who support Ukraine financially and also publicly. They have been pushing the US to place sanctions on Russia in order to try and force Vladimir Putin's hand into accepting a ceasefire. There is a rhetoric across experts, many experts we've had on the programme. They say that Vladimir Putin thinks he's winning this war, and therefore for him to commit to a ceasefire would him be giving up his advantage. US support to Ukraine as well is a key point, because recent shipments which had been sent or set to be sent to Ukraine, which were agreed under the Biden administration, some of those have been paused, the US saying that their own personal stockpiles are diminishing and they don't have the ability to send those weapons. So a conversation here that the US really is a key part of this Russia-Ukraine conflict, and Trump's rhetoric has sometimes been positive towards Vladimir Putin, sometimes been negative. Trump also overnight said that Vladimir Putin is still killing and killing. And the words that Trump uses, it feels like sometimes he tries to take both sides of the fence on this topic, but clearly the talk around sanctions is moving forward. The European Union have done over a dozen sets of sanctions on Russia, and they're trying to limit the amount of money that Russia can earn and therefore provide into their ongoing war effort, in a war that has been going on now directly into its fourth year. But the US sanctions could be pivotal, looking at third-party sanctions on nations that are purchasing Russian oil, like India, like China, and other countries as well. They're looking at 500% tariffs on those nations, which would make it untenable to buy Russian oil. This would be crippling to the Russian economy. Oil and natural gas is such a huge part of the Russian economy, and that would have a devastating impact, therefore, to their war efforts. Conversations with Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky have also been ongoing, relating to Patriot missile systems which are vital in stopping the Russian attacks that have been intensifying in recent times. I think the rhetoric with Trump and Putin is one we need to be cautious about. Trump does change his mind, he changes what he says publicly. Sometimes it feels like he's ready to put pressure on Vladimir Putin. Sometimes it feels like he's supporting Putin and potentially praising Putin for how he's acting as a leader. One that we will keep a close eye on and one that will continue to develop as work towards a potential ceasefire continues but remains at an impasse.
Thank you, Joshua Barnes, for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. US President Donald Trump has said